The fifth Beatle? Before the Beatles, the producer George Martin mainly produced records of funny songs. But Martin knew a lot about music and about recording. Over the years, he helped the Beatles to grow as musicians. At first, he was really the boss, but after a time, the band told him what they wanted. A few weeks later, Martin called Brian Epstein. Yes, the band could make a record with him, but not with Pete Best on drums. In the producer's opinion, Pete wasn't good enough. It was a hard decision for the band, but Pete had to go. The drummer was angry when Brian Epstein told him the news. The next decision was easier. In Paul's words, they wanted the greatest drummer in Liverpool, their friend from Hamburg, Ringo Starr. Epstein called Ringo on a Wednesday and asked him to join the band. By Saturday, Ringo was the new drummer. Some fans weren't happy about the change. At the Cavern, a few people shouted angrily and held up signs, "Pete is best." The married Beatle. Before they went back to London, John married his girlfriend, Cynthia. Marriage to a Beatle wasn't easy. John was often away from home. When their son Julian was born in 1963, fans even ran after John at the hospital. Later, the Beatles didn't want their young fans to know that one of the band was married. After their first tour of the US, a reporter asked John, "Did your wife like the country?" John joked, "Who? Who?" The band recorded their first single, "Love Me Do," at Abbey Road in September 1962. It was one of Paul's songs. Fans wrote to radio stations asking them to play the record. By December 1962, the song was quite successful at number 17. The Beatles were on their way. Beatlemania. It was time to choose a song for the important second record. George Martin didn't like any of John and Paul's songs at the time, so he chose a new song. The group said no. They wanted to do one of their songs. Today, many bands write their own songs, but at the time, this was a brave decision for a new band. Finally, Martin agreed to record one of John's songs, "Please Please Me." At first, it was a slow song, but the producer asked them to play it faster. After they recorded it, Martin told them, "You have just recorded your first number one." The Beatles worked hard to make this true. They drove all over Britain to concerts. Sometimes they stopped the van to listen to their own song on the radio. Once, the van was freezing after the front window broke. The Beatles lay together in the back to keep warm. In March 1963, "Please Please Me" reached number one. George Martin was right. After that, number one followed number one. Their singles in 1963 were "From Me to You," "She Loves You," and "I Want to Hold Your Hand." Suddenly, everybody loved the Beatles. When the band played in concert, police had to hold back crowds of screaming fans, mainly girls. One newspaper thought of a new word to describe the country's love of the boys from Liverpool: Beatlemania. Every Beatles single reached number one until 1967. The band also recorded their first album early in 1963. George Martin asked them to come to the studio and play all the songs from their live show. They did this in one long day. The album, Please Please Me, was recorded in about 12 hours. It went to number 1 too.